Welcome back to another episode on Between the Notes podcast with our friend of the pod. I'm sure it's official now, Jon Price.
Definitely.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, welcome, John.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I'm excited to go again.
Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, every time you're around, we tend to talk about good stuff, so we just thought, well, why not? Why not keep having you? Plus, we like to hang out.
Absolutely. Listen, it's like the thing to do. If you reach a certain age, you got to start a podcast so you can actually hang out with your friends.
That's exactly right, because Lord knows we live in 3 different cities, so...
Wow, yeah, right, exactly.
So, yeah, when we were... Yeah, well, go ahead, Brian.
So say, fellas, what are we going to get into today? We could go a million different ways,
Yeah.
but let's see what would... So let's kind of recap what we were talking about last time. John, you had a good point that we were talking... Well, remind me exactly what we were talking about there. I know we just said it 20 minutes ago.
So I think when we first started talking about me coming on, I think the idea was we were going to kind of do a walkthrough of like a pedagogy 101.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think we just got super excited and we talked about a bunch of different stuff, but I'm not sure we actually got back around to like pedagogy 101. And so
well, let's
I
say
thought,
this. My idea for this anyway was like a gentle on-ramping, right? So no matter what we talk about, I just think it's super important for other teachers of voice or young singers that are watching this not to be overwhelmed by too deep of a dive into something where they're like, I don't even know what that means, right? Because I think we want to make sure that this is user friendly as possible. So I love the idea of going with what we initially thought about, and if we get time to talk about some of the other topics, I'm sure we will. So
I'm sure. Listen, we're gonna end up talking about whatever we want to talk about, but there was a question. There was a question that we almost got into last time that I've been thinking about since then, which is if you were gonna structure like a week, like we have the Voice Pedagogy Institute over at Westminster, registration now open, July 20th through 24th. Please join us.
There you go.
plug.
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things we talk about is, what do you cover? What do you leave out? And what order do you sort of go in? And an idea we sort of came around to a while ago that I think is useful is that really the way that we have to think about the voice is in models. So instead of it being like, this is how the voice works, there's a bunch of different ways to think about the voice how the voice works, and depending on what you're trying to get at, different angles make more sense. The two big frameworks that we talk about a lot are thinking about the voice as a function of your own anatomy and physiology. So we think about like, you have vocal folds, you've got a respiratory system, you got all the individual parts, you got a soft palate, thinking about it as like an extension of our biology, which I think is the way that, certainly the first pedagogy class I took, that's how we approached it. And that's really useful. And the second is to think about the voice as an acoustic instrument. So that's comparing it to, a clarinet, a trombone, a cello, thinking about it functioning much more according to the kind of the breakdown of another instrument. So we kind of think about those as the two main doors to walk through. And I just, want to first kind of toss that idea out to y'all and see, maybe when you think about the voice, do you tend to think of it as an extension of your body, or do you tend to think of it as an instrument, a little bit separate?
For me, I think it has to be, for me, I think the answer is both, right? Like, obviously, the singing voice is an extension of our body. And I think a lot of times young singers, one of the hurdles that they have to overcome pretty early on is understanding, when I sing, it's just like elegant yelling. However,
sometimes
what else do I have? Sometimes elegant, sometimes just yelling. But it's like understanding that it is a part of you. So you can't expect to sing well if you haven't slept well. You can't expect to sing well if you're not hydrated. You can't expect to sing well if your brain is in 15 other places. So it is an extension of yourself by all means. But at the same time, I think you do have to think of it as a completely different instrument, because certainly in classical singing, we are trying to achieve a type of sound that most of us do not go around using on a daily basis. We're trying... Oh, do you now? Well, that's fantastic.
No, you're right. Go ahead.
No, I mean, so I think it's a combo, and I think I think it's those are two great questions to kind of go in it with. But I think that and I think that the idea is that you eventually talk about both of those things and how applicable they are.
Yeah. No, Weston and I on one of my trips to Houston when I was hanging out with him and his family, he was giving me a hard time because I came up with this idea that singing is mysterious. And it is, and it isn't. But I say that and I bring that up just because it's fun, but also too, John and I were talking a little bit earlier about anatomy, right? And they're it kind of goes back and forth between people think, oh, anatomy is absolutely crucial to know, and then it's like less crucial to like really, you need to kind of know what's going on, but
Right.
how much do we really get into all of the little different things that are there? And I'd say for me, when I said that statement, it was before I had started my master's in voice pedagogy from Westminster Choir College. Thank you very much. And it did, kind of demystifying it and seeing what was happening. Now, I had been strobed before, but I didn't exactly. I mean, I saw the vocal folds coming together, and you're like, okay, great. And you kind of get the idea. Oh, look, they're stretching when I say, okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
But I think understanding, like, one of the things, so John's mom, Dr. Kathy Price, was my mentor and taught a lot of, certainly the voice science class and some other things. And when we built a model of the larynx, it wasn't super fancy, but it was like there was either the construction paper kind of model, or there was the really involved clay model, which I did not think I had what it took to get that together. But anyway, the point being is that I learned, okay, that's when the voice tilts. That's how the chords stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Can I start to understand what it feels like for that to happen, as opposed to just being like, oh, here's my chest voice, here's my head voice, there's a falsetto, and like, how do we kind of figure out the way we blend those two registers? So there's that I wanted to say, that I think that the anatomy, although it might not be helpful for everybody, for me, it was really helpful to just kind of get myself over a hump of being like, I don't know, I kind of feel what's going on, but even still, sometimes I feel something and I can't feel it again in the same way the next day. And so therefore I'm not finding the consistency that I'm hoping for. And there was one other thing I was going to say that I'm sure will come to me when you guys
But as you were saying that, like the first thing that came, I had the opportunity to sub actually for my mom's undergraduate voice science class last week, and one thing that really hit me hard was like going over the anatomy scratches such an itch for people.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just, I was just so struck. It's like these singers who I think to that point singing had been totally mysterious, and this thing that happens in one-on-one sessions in a private room where you kind of gather around the piano and you make noises together, and you speak in Italian poorly, and then you kind of go through this, and I think it felt like it was this sort of mystical, mysterious experience, and then all of a sudden looking at somebody with a rubber hose up their nose, and you say, oh, I see where it all comes from. I see these two little vocal folds coming together, and boom, all of a sudden things seem a little less mystical, and it feels a little bit more tangible. And I think that there's something really, really satisfying about just feeling like you have a handle on how it works. And I think that's one of the big things that thinking about the voice as an extension of your anatomy, that really does for you. The same way that, like, if you're playing the trumpet, Brian, a lot more about this than I do.
But Weston did a little trumpet playing.
Oh, I didn't know that. Hey,
there you go.
Left out. Well, my dad plays the euphonium, so I'm.
We're all in the brass family, baby.
They're in it's a brass.
It's
brass
important
thing.
to know where your slides are and what the purpose of the slides are, right?
I've heard that about
to know
you,
what
Weston.
valves do what, right? It's like.
And the idea that you could take apart the instrument and just like look at it and say, "Oh, that's what that does. That does that.
Right.
If this is a little bit malfunctional, I can fix it."
I just want to jump in real quick. I thought about the other thing. I knew it would come to me because you guys would jog my memory. But in talking about whether the voice we talk about or think about the voice as a part of ourself or as its own thing, I agree 100% with what Weston said. It's both. But I do understand, I think, especially as a tenor, that sometimes we can make the voice and not me, because the voice is not doing what I'm trying to make it do. Right? I'm not trying to squeeze or compress too much for that high note. I'm just trying to sing that pitch.
I think
The
every
only
voice
way I
category
know
would
how to-
argue that that's not just a tenor thing.
Well, yeah,
we feel
I
we
mean,
feel it a
fair
little
enough.
deeper.
You're such precious little.
We are I mean, and to be honest with you, a lot of what I teach are tenors and a lot of what I work with, and I see the frustration on somebody's face when they're like, I'm not trying to do that. I was like, I know you're
I'm
not
just,
trying.
I say that because I've had the same experience. I'm in a lesson with my teacher and he's like, no. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm not trying to do that. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
You got to
So
imagine,
I think
And that
yeah,
that is also where like it's helpful to think about evolutionarily speaking. A lot of the things that our bodies are wired to do under pressure are disastrous for our singing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you get fight, flight, or freeze response, that's going to activate all sorts of things that are not good for achieving what we want. You have many more muscles that elevate the larynx than that depress it.
Mm-hmm.
If you are on alert, you're likely to have your pharyngeal constrictors, those muscles that move food down in the back of your neck, those activate to protect the spinal column and your vocal folds themselves. The reason we have them, evolutionarily speaking, is to protect the airway. So all of the more kind of like human responses that we have to things are really not in great relationship with our singing. We have to be in a fairly balanced place in terms of our physiology in order to access our most cultivated singing.
Sure.
I love that I love when you said balance there, just because I really make it a point to explain to my singers there's a difference between a relaxed position and a released position, which has to have the balance, right? It has to have the balance to be released. Otherwise, relaxed is like, especially once you want to try and go up to a higher tessitura, it's like, well, if you don't have the breath energy, the connection to the body, you have no choice but to squeeze something to get that pitch to come out. Otherwise, the speed of the air and the flow of the air it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, while our singing is an extension of our bodies, I mean, it's like I've been watching the Winter Olympics, and you see these amazing figure skaters, and it's like skating on one skate or doing 4 spins in the air and coming down on one skate. That's not a normal human thing. And speaking about balance, I'm sure they want to just put their other foot down to the initial human response is to make sure that we do have balance. And so I think there's a lot of, in fact, one of your colleagues, Brian, I remember Gary Arvin, who is one of the vocal coaches there at Indiana University.
Sure.
Back when I was a student there, he used to talk about the similarities between figure skating and singing and how, they're both high pressure. It's both all about, finding elegance and balance and, under a microscope, so to speak, and aiming for something that looks, perfect and effortless, while underneath it all, it's all very calculated and purposeful and, and so, but I think that if you think of singing as an Olympic event, which it's never too late to maybe write in and see if we can get that added for them.
It's funny. I always hear classical singers especially refer to themselves as Olympic athletes. I don't hear too many Olympic athletes refer to themselves as classical singers.
Yeah, fair enough.
I just think they just don't know it. They need to watch what we do. And if we were getting gold medals, well, I guess Operalia does a little bit of that. But
right.
If we were to find a venue that could give us gold and silver and bronze, that'd be cool. But I digress. Anyway, I love what you're saying, Brian. I think it absolutely is about balance and making sure that in any kind of approach that we always find. That it's not just one thing. It's like the balance of 2 or more things, that help us to find the equation that we're looking for,
Yeah, and I think the fact that we can't hear our voices the way everyone else on the planet hears our voice also is a disconnect. That's like, damn it, that voice is just not... I want it to be my best friend. I want it to serve me. And it's just doing its own thing. And I don't know why.
I know. Well, it's funny. A little shout out to one of our regular listeners, my dad, Greg Hurt. When he has asked over time that I give him a voice lesson, and one time we actually tried it, and I will say, Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm going to do a little bit of an imitation of you here. So when my dad goes to sing, it's usually something that's involving a great deal of tension. So he's like, meh, like it's a very constricted knurtle, with like a lot of laryngeal tension, and it's like what's fascinating to me is like that's your thought of like, oh, I'm going to make my sound be different than what I speak, because obviously operatic singing doesn't sound like how you talk, really. Unless you talk like Giorgio Tozzi used to speak. But, you know, it's like, what is that? And I think that that's where the mystery kind of comes in, especially for young singers or people on the outside, you know, fringe of what it is that we all do. There's this big question mark of like, how do you make those sounds? And John, to your point, it's like understanding the instrument as like, oh, let's take it apart and take a look at it, or through a scope, you know. And I recommend that every young singer get scoped, whether you're sick or not. Go to an ENT and just get a baseline scope so that you have a picture of your chords when they're super healthy. And then when you do get sick,
save up your pennies for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully your insurance can cover that.
Let me just offer. I'll speak very carefully here. It might be advantageous if the next time you're maybe feeling just a little bit of light, you know, maybe sinus pressure or hoarseness, to mention to your general practitioner that, you know, you perhaps are having some sinus and potentially acid reflux distress, and it might be a good idea to go and get scoped by a laryngologist just to make sure nothing's wrong.
There's your referral. There's
exactly that kind of ties everything together. Yeah, exactly. Because if you go in, and you're like, hey, I just wanted to get scoped for fun.
Great.
Right? $400, please.
At least.
Oh, that's before getting out of the waiting room.
I was about to say, not in New York.
It is. That's such a great point. So one thing that happens, actually, that brings us back to that question of what do you include in a pedagogy class, and a lot of times, in addition to that idea of how do we think about the voice, the other big one is vocal health, and what does every singer need to know about vocal health and vocal hygiene. You know, the idea of you know, how much water to drink. The fact one thing that's always interesting is that the water that you enjoy today helps your vocal folds tomorrow. You know, that when you take a swig of water, you know, when you're in something, it might feel soothing, but it's not hydrating your vocal folds. The only way to deliver moisture directly to the vocal folds is steam or nebulizer. And then anything else is just going to be time. So, you know, take a drink of water. So if you have a big thing to sing, start hydrating the day before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important to understand.
No, Irini has become a big fan of the nebulizer just in the past couple of weeks. And I was like, oh, hey, when'd you get that? Oh, I ordered it on, you know, Amazon or whatever. It's like, of course. But, you know, she loves it. It really
the
helps
amount
her.
of like vocal health and voice ped gear that's now out there has, I feel like it's quadrupled in the last like 2-3 years. Used to be, just like get a straw from like your local, you know, wherever
gas station
and bring it. It's great. You know, now the local wherever doesn't have straws, but you can purchase a, you know, $90 singing straw at the perfect diameter.
Please
that can
don't.
be with you all the time.
Right.
Unless you've got money to burn, no need to buy a $90 singing straw.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's super interesting, guys. And I love that. And maybe this next idea that I thought was something we were talking about, kind of spitballing earlier when we were planning this episode. What are some of the things that we all encounter in our studios when students show up, either for a trial lesson or come into the studio, you know, or like, you know, I do some one-offs in New York. Weston teaches online. John's got all kinds of irons in the fire. I think it might be interesting for us to just kind of go around the table, as it were, and just talk about some of the things that we see and what are common, you know, kind of things that we're like, okay, I see a lot of this in these kinds of singers. How do we address that?
Yeah.
You want to go first, John?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm excited for this little round table because I want to steal as much as I possibly can from all of you. When I first started teaching musical theater and didn't know what I was doing, one of the first things I did was I invited every smart person in musical theater that I knew to come and teach my studio class for me. Nice. And I just observed and, you know, just stole liberally. And let me tell you, can't recommend that enough.
So true.
You know, and it's really great when you get to have people who know more than you teach your students, and then you can observe them and see what they seem to go to and see what their priorities are.
Right.
So one thing that I've come to, especially this is more of a piece of advice for teachers, when you have a lesson with a new student, two things that are really, really advisable things is one, let them sing. I can't tell you how many times early on I talked my way through the entire lesson, and then this person who came so that they could sing, only got to take, 5-10 minutes of the lesson actually singing. The rest was me going on about all the things that we could do. So first, let them sing. Thing number one. Thing number two is, this is something that I learned from Matt Edwards, who's down at Shenandoah, said it's really great if you are able to help the singer that you're having a lesson with solve a problem. So a problem that's already meaningful to them. So you may hear somebody all the time, somebody will come in and I'll see them and I can see that their head is a full body length in front of the rest of their body. The most like turtleneck of all time. And I'll see that they're standing, with their feet in just nothing resembling balance. Their hips are, on entirely different planes. I'm like, oh, well, this person needs a lot of alignment work. You couldn't say less sexy things to most people. Then we need to do some alignment work, right. And so, but you ask that person, well, what'd you like to work on? And always it's like either hi there. Somebody to
you heard the dog.
I love that.
My dog's getting hungry.
Yeah. But it's always either something interpretive, that they want to do something that feels like they're being more musical or more expressive, or it's high notes.
Yeah.
Those are the two things you get from me. So if you can do something for them that helps them access a high note better, and or feel like they're living in their interpretive self, their creative self a little bit more, that's maybe the best thing you can do to give that person something that they can take with them right away, and it makes it much more likely that they're going to come back so that you can get on the alignment work that really needs to happen.
I love that. I think that's really, as someone who's, in the audition season and having to do trial lessons and all this kind of stuff and hoping to get, good quality material, vocal material to deal with in incoming students, it's really hard to, and I think that's why the tendency is to try and talk a lot, right? Because we want to show what we know. And it's easier for us to do that, or we can't do it while they're singing at us so much. But I think I love what you said there about just, if you can solve one problem for them, that'll be enough to be like, ding, I got to come back for more of this.
And one of the things
I'm stealing that.
Oh yeah, one of the things that I've found over the years, and I've certainly been guilty of all the wrong things in the past. Of, oops, didn't mean to talk all the way through that lesson. I'm so sorry. Yeah. But if you frame, for any of you teachers out there that might be new to this or just wanting a different opinion, I like to frame questions to the students from the get-go of the lesson. So, in other words, instead of making them feel like, oh, I am the all-knowing, it's like, I start the lesson, I say, hey, what would you like to work on today?
Right.
Because you're there to help them, right? You're not there to teach them everything you know. Right. You're there to help them on their journey. And so when you frame it in a way of like, well, hey, what would you like to work on today? And sometimes with young singers, they have no idea what those answers could even be. You know what I mean? They're like, I don't know. Yeah. And then you can, how's vocalizing going? Are you doing well with the different exercises that I've given you so far? And have you looked at the different repertoire that you'd like to, did you bring something specific to sing? And I think with all of those things, asking questions, how did you feel like that went? But to your point, John, yes, let them sing. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's so incredibly important, so that you can get an idea of like, okay, that wasn't half bad. But if you stop them every 4 measures or every 8 measures, then it's like, I don't even know what the whole thing would sound like, or can you even sing the whole thing?
Sure.
Yeah.
Talk about flow of the energy and flow of the stamina of singing the aria or the scene or whatever it is. I guess if I think about it, especially being a tenor, I get a lot of tenors.
You're a tenor?
Well, once upon a time, at least. a lot of the guys that I see in New York are tenors, and a lot of them are, kind of late 20s, 30s, and even mid 30s. And so by that point, the voice has grown a lot
Yeah.
since when people were in school. And very often there are other, things that used to work 5 and 10 years ago are no longer working in the same way.
Sure.
And I feel like almost 85 to 90% of the time, I start with some kind of base of the tongue tension thing. And usually, um, guys who have been like trudging away at that kind of full lyric repertoire for a while, the longer they do it, the more rigid it becomes. And I think when the base of the tongue is rigid or tight, or, some of them are like, it's like as hard as a rock, because it's so hard, the larynx is not free to turn over. And so they end up singing wide open, just all the way up.
So I'd love
Right?
to.
I mean,
I'd love to drill
uh-huh.
down on since I have you here, Brian.
Sure.
And I'd love to unpack a little bit of that because I want to because you talk about that a lot, and I think it's really really fantastic, and it's clearly a critical couple of things to understand. So first of all, we talk about releasing the base of the tongue. I think
Right.
if
Right
you
up in
haven't
here.
already just gone to YouTube or images and just seen somebody in an MRI singing to get an idea of, first of all, where the base of the tongue is and just how
massive.
large it is,
Yeah.
treat yourself and be frightened. So when we're
Right.
talking about the base of the tongue, what are some things you do with students to help them release the base of the tongue?
Well, I'm thrilled to get into this also with Weston here, because Weston and I shared a lot of talk about this kind of early on in my own, not early on in my own singing, but early on in figuring this stuff out.
Yeah.
So Weston and I both studied with Stephen Smith at the time when we met. Stephen Smith used to come and like put his hands on your jaw and like kind of dig in a little
He'd
bit.
dig his thumb into here.
Yeah.
Well, so it was kind of a twofer,
Right. Right. And so he would be, on the one hand, he would feel if you were getting tense, and generally it feels like a pushing down thing to the other person. And then also if he felt it tense up, he'd push in to try and make it release, like a massage, as it were. Now, I would say that I was not trying to keep the base of my tongue tight, for sure. I was not. But I was using it as a way to stabilize my larynx in a way that was a little bit lower position, like I'm doing right now, right? So I get a little bit longer vocal tract because the larynx is lower. But that is not a free nor released way to do that.
So just to kind of give some color
Yeah.
around that. So the hyoid bone is what the larynx is suspended from. The hyoid bone is the only bone in your body not connected to another bone.
Find that fascinating.
So it allows the larynx to be movable. And as I said earlier, you have way more muscles in your body that elevate the larynx than that depress it. As we talked about, in most singing, we want a lower larynx than in speech. So an approach that a lot of people use is they use the mylohyoid and or the digastric muscle, which are those muscles, tongue extension muscles that you kind of are touching when you're underneath the chin, to make it not to lower the larynx, but to keep it wherever it is. Because they're not able to depress the larynx, but they're able to sort of help you hold, because the hyoid bone is connected to the tongue. So if you make those muscles rigid, you can kind of hold the hyoid bone in place and not allow the larynx to rise. But the problem is those muscles get tight, and once you tighten muscles, you're losing space.
Right.
So in both cases, you're losing resonance and you're
Right.
also fatiguing.
So I guess the answer, like, to kind of get to like something really practical, Weston and I were doing straw phonation out by his back pool. And then we were doing raspberries. Remember, we were doing raspberries all the way, kind of up and down.
Sounds like a party.
You
have no idea how fun we can be.
That's right, guys. We're gonna throw parties around the world, around the
Grab a
USA,
straw.
where we're gonna have straws and do raspberries up through the pisode and up to the high. And so, like, to answer the question, I couldn't do it. Like, I was just like, I can't do this. I don't know. He's like, well, you got to release. I was like, whatever, dude. I just don't sing like that. And then I was like, oh, now I can. And now it's so much easier. I tell my students all the time, it's not about strength, it's about coordination.
Yeah.
Because essentially I lost a lot of my strength of the resilience of those muscles, because after a while of singing like that, like the best way I can explain it is the elasticity that those muscles used to have, it no longer has. Right? They've got a little bit, but it's not nearly as kind of youthful and resilient as it used to be. So I start, I do exercises. That the first thing I do is always some kind of SOVT, or to kind of get the tongue out, and then once it's out, release the bass and the throat, and then do like a gentle hum, just to get the cords vibrating and the blood flowing to there.
And during the hum, is
Um,
that just like a lips together hum? Is it an NG hum?
so
Is
kind of
it
just like this.
great?
So holding the tip of the tongue with the teeth, and then relaxing, and then sending the air. So it's not really about the sound at all as much about the buzz.
Right.
And a lot of my younger students are like, geez, it's so buzzy, it's making my nose tickle. I'm like, good. This is what we're talking about. If you can get your buzz to get into like this kind of masky area that people so infamously and famously love to talk about, we want that to be a result of free flowing air and good closure, obviously, but free flowing air that is not tight, because the more, as Weston loves to say, and he's totally right, localized muscular tension, and the more soft tissue that is brought into this, the more dampened the sound is going to be. And those are all bad things for singers, foremen, and traveling over orchestras and singing in big halls without busting a gut, right?
Yeah, totally.
Weston, what do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just, talking about the tongue. There's a couple of different ways that the tongue can kind of really be an obstacle in singing. Yeah. And, one of them is that there's the retraction, right?
Right, sure.
So, and for a variety of reasons, right? You're basically stuffing this huge muscle into the pharynx, or the throat, which is dampening the opportunity for resonance.
Right.
Not only that, but then you're also tightening or tensioning these muscles, so that then, like we were just talking about, it gets in the way of allowing the larynx to be low and free and open with space.
Yeah.
But the tongue can also become depressed, right? So like if you sing and your tongue looks like your finger is being pushed down on it, we don't want that kind of tension either, right? So you don't want the depression, you don't want the retraction. It's tricky. It's very tricky. John, can you talk a little?
Very mysterious.
It's very mysterious. Can you unravel the mystery of the tongue, John?
Yeah. Just give me like 3 minutes. I'll do a tight. I'll do a tight two.
I think that in voice science class, I learned that the tongue is made up of at least 5, right, John? Five muscles?
Yeah, I don't remember how many. It's many in many different directions. And if you look at a cross section, you see you have muscles running in all different directions, and incredibly strong. So I want to just harken back to that thing we talked about last time, the idea that muscles retract toward their point of origin.
Right.
So meaning that every muscle has a point of origin and an insertion point. Where it starts and where it goes to, and that when a muscle is active, it will contract, so it will get shorter, and it will go in the direction of its point of origin. So basically, when the tongue is tight, it's moving it'll move in the direction of its points of origin. So it'll retract. It'll any of those other muscles, anything that you're seeing that's sort of pulling back and down, that's the tongue muscles within the tongue moving toward their points of origin. So they're going to kind of move it in whatever direction the muscle started in. So as we talked about, any kind of activation that we don't want, so muscles being activated, being shortened beyond their intended use, we call that tension. And it's going to create less space. It's going to dampen things. It's going to reduce your ability to have control over the tongue, because ultimately what we want with the tongue is for it to be a resonance shaper and an articulator.
Right.
So the more that the tongue is in the mouth or closer to the soft palate, the more closed the vowel quality is. The more that the tongue is kind of out of the mouth and a little more in the throat, as long as there isn't additional constriction, the more open the vowel quality is.
Right.
Yeah, one of the thing, Wes, another thing that we were doing, kind of out by the pool again. He had very nice neighbors, and nobody called the cops on us. But he would take, he took his tongue, and I don't remember when you first, where you first saw this, but I've heard other people talk about it, like Dolores Zajek in a master class, taking the tongue out.
Oh, literally holding it.
Mhm.
Yeah, holding it.
Oh, yeah.
And just going "Ooh," all the way up through. Like, I mean, I now can do that and go up pretty high. If I'm lucky.
If you're in a shared studio space and you see a little pack of gauze on the side, you can be pretty sure that you've got a tongue holder
Yeah.
that you're sharing space with.
My first teacher, Gerald
go ahead.
Dolter, inspired that. He used to have a pack
really?
of like he had a whole thing of napkins on his piano, and he would just be like, "Grab a napkin," and you'd grab one. And,
Yeah.
Now, of course, the danger is that if you, like you said, the tongue is connected to the hyoid bone. So if you pull too far, you're essentially going to yank the larynx up, right? 'Cause
Right.
if the tongue going back is making the larynx drop, the tongue being pulled out of your mouth is also going to
Right. It only
Yeah.
works if by doing that you're then able to coordinate a quasi normal sounding voice. If you're like,
That's right.
okay, I can have my tongue out of my mouth and then my voice can still sound relatively normal, that's a good sign that I've been able to release those muscles, that they're not contracted, because I'm
Exactly.
able to do that even with the tongue extended out of the mouth. So if you have a student that has the ability to make that adjustment, then okay, well, that might be a good tool to use. But if you have a student who you pull the tongue out of the mouth and all of a sudden you're just getting this like really pinched off sound, probably not. That's not the best intervention for that student at that point.
I love that because so many teachers, I think, would, well, you see, it's just too tight. You're just using too much tongue tension. You got to quit. It's like, well, hold on. Maybe they haven't figured out A, B, and C before you're jumping to D, E, and F. So,
and I love that point.
I
love that point because anytime you're using the tongue as a stabilizer, it's because you were in need of a stabilizer, right? So I tensed my tongue to stabilize my larynx because I don't know how to do it any other way. So it is not good, solid teaching to take away the stabilizer without giving the voice a different stabilizer.
Sure.
Right. I talk all the time about if you're not going to use the lower torso as the method of being hooked up to the full instrument, something else is going to make sure that you're supporting your sound. And it's 9 times out of 10 the wrong thing, right? So
Sure.
I think that you're absolutely right. And this is where, Brian, your sentence makes a lot of sense. Singing is mysterious because it's like every person is not doing the same thing in the same way. And so you, as a teacher at least, you've got to figure out, oh, what are you doing? What's going on? And over time, I mean, I'm sure just like a doctor, it's like, oh, yeah, you've got bacterial tonsillitis and that's what I'm suffering through right now.
All right.
But, it's like, you hear things often enough and you're like, oh, okay, this is what you're doing. Or maybe this is what you're doing. Let's see if we can help with that. But I do think that utilizing, just to sort of summarize what we've talked about, using the tongue as a raspberry. And if you can't do a raspberry, it's either because there's so much tongue tension or your airspeed isn't fast enough.
Or you have a tongue tie.
Or you have a tongue tie. That's
Or
right.
a tongue tie, yeah.
Right? It's
Frenulum.
what is that thing called? Frenulum, right.
Frenulum, yeah.
I was going to use a completely different word, and it was not the right word.
Good.
And it would have changed the rating on this show.
Yeah, but I got us an explicit rating. Let's not do
I
that.
feel like I know where you're going there. Yeah, okay.
I'm sure you do. Anyway, but right. So, but if you don't have the tongue tie, then yeah, it's like you gotta work backwards. It's not like, oh wow, you should be able to do that as a singer. I can't tell you how many times people say those types of things.
Well, and also there are certain things like a raspberry. If you notice that the student is having a hard time keeping their tongue free and able to move at will, and they're not able to do a raspberry, okay, I got a correlation there. It may be worth some time helping this person work on doing a raspberry, because I think it speaks directly to the thing that they're having an issue with. If you feel like they're singing pretty freely, but they just kind of can't coordinate a raspberry just because it feels weird to them, then maybe we don't need to spend 20 minutes of your lesson trying to figure out how to do a raspberry. I say this as somebody who has spent 20, 30 minutes in a lesson trying to help somebody do a lip trill or a raspberry, and then I can tell you that was not time well spent, almost always. occasionally really it's a good idea, but it's like knowing what are we working toward, what is this in service of, and is spending that time really worth it in terms of moving that person forward. So we spent like a little time here unpacking the tongue. Brian, we also asked about turning over and high notes.
Right. Oh,
sure.
To teach us how.
Right. Sure. In 12 easy steps. No, I think, okay, so let's just go from, and you correct me if anything I say here is not right from a pedagogical standpoint, but if the base of the tongue is tensing somehow, then the larynx cannot freely tilt forward and stretch back so that the CT muscles can take over, right? Is that all right?
Yeah, just to kind of color that in for people a little bit. So you have two primary muscles of registration, so to speak. We're thinking about the voice as an anatomical instrument. You have the thyroarytenoid, the TA, so it runs from the thyroid cartilage to the arytenoids. That is the big muscle inside of the vocal folds, and we think about that as the main thing that makes the vocal folds thicker. We associate thickness with chest voice. And then we have the CT muscles, the cricothyroid muscles. They run from the cricoid cartilage up to the thyroid cartilage. And when they engage, they pull the vocal folds forward and they tilt the larynx so that the whole thing can tilt and thin. So when we talk about the larynx tilting, it's the cricoid cartilage tilting as the vocal folds are stretching. So
right. And the more as I'm working on this Beethoven 9 thing right now, the tessitura is kind of
the thyroid cartilage tilting so that the vocal folds thin. Sorry.
Right.
Clean
the more I can think these days about stretching as opposed to just about anything else, the more successful I will be. Because as soon as my chords get too bulky or I tend to sing
my stretch.
Hey, look at that.
Hey.
I use these resistance bands all the time as an analogy of what it is that we're trying to do, because it's not stair stepping. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's literally when you go from, and oftentimes Mozart set it up differently than Verdi or Puccini, for example. But I think when we have the opportunity to portamento and stretch into a high note, like you're saying, it's so much of an easier thought process, right? Because it's not like you're trying to hit the note, you're not trying to punch the note, you're not trying to. It's just stretching through. And I think just to color in one more, I love this phrase, I'm going to steal it from you, John, but just to color in one more time, the tilt of the larynx and the stretching of the chords is what happens as we ascend in pitch, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page with what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this idea of these two different voices, registers, however we want to talk about them, and then the blending of that. But if we don't, and like Leo Nucci would, lots of people would talk about the.
Well, you're talking about chest voice and head voice, right?
Well, I mean, CT is more head voice and chest voice is more.
That's
TA,
a whole can of worms. That might.
Well, but you just said
be its own thing. Associated with.
Let's say that.
Yeah. But I mean,
go ahead, Weston,
Brian,
what are you going to say?
Well, you just said these two registrations, and so I just wanted to kind of put a label on what two registrations you're talking about.
John, labels? I don't know. What should I say?
No. So the reason that this is complicated is that people who equally know what they're talking about will say head voice, and they'll be talking about a turned over sound that still has a lot of what we might hear acoustically as chest voice, and somebody else might say no, head voice is falsetto. I'm
about to say let's exaggerate it.
So depending on who you're talking to, so it's just important to define terms. I think that in this case, I think it might be useful to think about just talking about the idea of turned over is finding an acoustic quality that will enable you to sing full-bodied high notes comfortably.
Sure,
I love it. And I think that, in talking about the ways that we do this, oftentimes the word cover is thrown in there. And so cover is dealing with tilt, but also a bit of, I don't know how much. I also don't want to step on anybody's toes, but a certain amount of vowel modification. So that if I'm trying to say like E or something, E, if I just sing a straight up E and try and use the same E for an octave from, say, A below middle C to A over middle C, it's going to be really pinched and stuff like that. So you have to have the space, and whether you want to call that, whether one wants to call that the integrity of the way the vowel is defined, so that it's not E but E. And already in that, just kind of sighing through passaggio, I'm thinking E, but I'm just being connected in my body in a way that I could do it in falsetto. But if I wanted, if I was trying to sing a more dolce passage of that, I would really try and make sure that from the collarbone down is nice and released, and that will allow the chest resonance, which I think is what makes the difference between, I don't know, John, I'm really like stepping on eggshells here. The difference
Just
between,
talk, man. You know more
just
about
talk
this than
about
most
it.
people.
The difference between a falsetto tone and the same pitch, I think often has to do with the connection to the body, and therefore the chest resonance that makes it sound like a full-bodied sound and not ee, 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 ee. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And the only thing I'm doing different, nothing is different in my throat. It's just that I've got the release down here that allows my, body to support the sound. And then it sounds like, off we do si much or something like that. Instead of, people used to make fun of me when I was in career, because when I would mark, they're like, you sound like a choir boy. And I was like, well, I did sing as a choir boy for a long time, but I'm not trying to. I mean, it was super funny. I think Yannick was the first one to be like, were you a choir boy? Yes.
So
'Cause he
that's so
tends to
interesting.
sing
So
in
you
his
so
falsetto a lot.
you felt like when you were marking, you were just sort of taking the body connection away from what you were doing when you were singing fully. That's that's fascinating, because that's.
But the thing is that if you would ask me to put in the body into it, sounds like it should be simple, right? No, I never could figure it out. I haven't figured it out until the past couple of months, honestly. But I figured it out, and so I'll take that win. You know what I mean? But I know lots of people used to say, I remember a conductor who was a wonderful conductor who was like, just take some of the chest resonance out of that. I'm like, well, if I take that body out of it, I don't know how to hit that pitch. It was like a G natural or an A flat or something. I was like, I can't sing above an E flat without, and I just had a lot of people probably, and I shouldn't even blame, and I'm not blaming teachers, but I think because I was a trumpet player and I knew how to support an instrument, my idea of support was much more in line with what a trumpet player does than what a singer needs to do. And let me tell you, trumpet supporting is much more aggressive. Yes, thank you. It's much more aggressive than what I go for in my singing, at least these days.
Yeah, I mean, this is truly where the mystery comes into play, because we started talking about vocabulary. What is a covered sound? What is a turned over sound?
Right.
And Brian, you mentioned Leo Nucci. My teacher, Stephen King, brings up the analogy all the time. He's like, in a master class, somebody asked Leo Nucci, when do you start to cover, or when do you start to turn over? They were using those two terms sort of synonymously. And he went over to the piano and played a low E flat. It's like, in other words, every note that I sing is turned over because I'm not singing in my vernacular.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, that's one way to think of it, right? It's like you're not going to go, ah, you're going to sing, ah. So that's a turned over sound. But then you can also look at, like, let's say for me as a baritone, there's a difference between the whole step of E flat and F natural above middle C, right? When you look at those two pitches, E flat is still not turned over,
Right.
and F is turned over.
Well, and that's true. That's true for everybody.
No matter what the voice category
No matter what the
is.
voice, because it's an acoustic phenomenon.
Mm.
Now,
Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So what we're talking about when there's that timbre change, the actual quality of the sound changes. That happens at a certain pitch level, right around that E flat, E natural, F. That's where the actual timbre itself changes. Now, the way that expresses itself in different voices may sound different, and the way you may need to think about it might change. But in terms of the actual quality, that's also, if you think about like sopranos and mezzos, it's the same neighborhood. They're making a transition into, a more kind of, middle voice, quality.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where the party is for everybody. When it turns out to, like, how am I handling this transitionally? again, different voice types spend more time. Brian, we talked about this. Tenors spend a lot of their time living above that transition. And we have to sing a lot of our time living above that same transition. So, yes, as a tenor, your vocal folds are smaller than a baritone. But acoustically, we have similar transitional points in terms of timbre shifts. Now, our experience of that may be different, but the timbre shifts happen kind of in the same basic neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, I would say neighborhood, but I mean, I've had experience working with a tenor where, you know, like I said, I need to make a shift at E natural or F. They didn't necessarily need to make that shift until F sharp, right? So it's like there might be another half step or a whole step higher where they then purposefully adjust the vowel in a way that allows them to find that freedom of being turned over.
And then I would ask the question, is that a function of instrument, or is that a function of what color were they cultivating?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'd have to be in the room to be able to see. But I think a lot of times a brighter timbre turns over later. You know, a darker timbre turns over earlier in terms of where those qualities happen. So a lot of it, I think, also depends on how you're using your instrument, how heartily are you singing, how fully. And certainly, depending on the technical approach, there might be some differences in terms of the finer points of where those things are happening. But I think that, you know, demystifying the fact that actual acoustic change is something that we're all managing who hang out in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. And I've also noticed that the more closed the vowel is, the sooner that it will want to turn over, right? Like an E or an A or an U or an O is going to turn over sooner than an ah will, for example. Yeah. Again, mysterious.
Yeah, but again, even the difference between an E and an A, you know, a lot of that we're talking about, like, okay, well, there's definitely a point where it's an A, and there's a point where it's an E, but where that specific point is a little bit fuzzy. You know, as you're hearing things along the line, just like that is turned over. When does that exactly happen? You know, it kind of a lot of that is a little bit squishy, which is why we're kind of you know, at the end of the day, we have to do this with our own ears, with the ears of our teacher, in a room, you know, playing with these things, you know, in real life, not just doing it theoretically.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which goes back to what you were saying at the beginning. I think it's nice, kind of full circle. Like when you're in a lesson, let the singer sing.
Yeah.
Right? Not just, you know, sing for, you know, if they're not doing it right. But I mean, at the same time, that is what they're there to do. I mean, if I went to the gym to work with a trainer, and all we did was talk about form, I'd be like, well, I don't feel like we did very much. You know what I mean?
Let them sweat.
Well, just like always, I feel like we could easily go on for another hour or two talking about a variety of different topics. But I think that for our listeners, we might want to sort of wrap this up and find a way to, I don't know. I mean, I want to invite our listeners to write in, leave comments on this video. Talk to us about the different things that you're struggling with in your own practice and your own lessons, because I think the more specific questions that we can answer on here, I think we'd have a direction to go in. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's like the mailbag, right? Like back in the old days, like let's go
to the
mailbag and see what's
exactly
postcards,
right.
You know, kind of thing.
That's exactly
super
right.
Fun. No, it's perfect timing because I have to run off to my studio class. But guys, I've so enjoyed this, and John, you know,
thank you so much.
We came in here to kind of wrap
blast.
up the last session, and I'm now left with like, well, there's 4 more things that I think we could talk about on the next session about, like,
absolutely.
You know, about stretch. And one of the things that who was it that said that muscle groups are party animals? Or
Martha Randall from University of Maryland.
Martha Randall. Because I was thinking about it as I was working today earlier on Pourquoi me réveiller, actually, and I was like, so like soft palate and tilt and stretch of the chords, those are party animals, are they not?
Yeah, when you start looking at all the attachments and connections in there, it's basically everything is kind of connected to everything else.
Right. So stay tuned for next time when we talk about all the party animal pairs and muscles and things that like
the
to
knee bones connected to the high bone.
Exactly. Because I was like, yeah, separating those functions is often hard, you know.
One thing that I did think
Absolutely.
about just before we head out of here is one piece of advice that I just want to encourage people. Obviously, we get into the weeds with some of these things.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid if something isn't working to try the opposite.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you get in there, you're like, oh, I'm really managing. It's supposed to turn over here. I'm supposed to do this way. You know, one time, what would happen if you just sang it wide open? You know,
Okay.
and sometimes you find something useful. Or like, no, I'm supposed to stay open there. Well, what would happen if you just felt like you were turned over the whole way? What would happen?
Yeah.
And because
When
again,
I
we're
talk-
talking about
Yeah, go ahead,
balancing
John.
individual voices. And so
Right, yeah,
depending
sure.
on what's happening for you, just don't be afraid to experiment.
When I talk
Totally.
about open, a half turned, and then a fully turned over, like a knee, nay, na, no, no, progressively half, like the knee is open, nay is half turned, na is fully turned. So till next time, guys, I can't wait to get back on this, but thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Jon, official friend of the pod. And we look forward to, we've got lots of great episodes coming up. Thank you for voting on our little poll that we did. And we are going to do each of
all of
those
them.
episodes
That's
and
right.
parcel them out over the next coming weeks. But thank you all so much. And Jon, thanks again. And we will see you next time.
My pleasure, guys.
See you later.
Thanks for joining us on Between the Notes. Make sure you hit that subscribe button.
And join us next week for more behind-the-scenes stories, laughs, and operatic gold coming your way.